All right, we're back with another overtime episode number 34. And this week, we are finally done with the Scream series with Scream, just called Scream, but it's Scream 5 from 2022. The brand new Scream. It's been out for a couple weeks at this point. Um, Went to the theater at like 1 o'clock on a Friday. I was the only person in the theater. It was pretty cool. And I saw Scream, and it's pretty good. I liked it. I'm gonna give it a 7 for the brand new Scream. Um, when we'll get to it, when we get to the end of this, we'll go through the other Screams, and I'll rank them. I don't know if I like this better than Scream 2, or if Scream 2 just slightly beats it. I really like Scream 2. I know a lot of people are kind of iffy on it, but I really liked it. But it was a real solid movie. A lot of good gore. This is probably like the meanest Ghostface that they've ever had. Uh, Everyone came back, of course, with David Arquette and Neve Campbell, Sydney, and then Courtney Cox, obviously. Um, this is the first one they did without Wes Craven. I know a lot of people were worried about that. It was Radio Silence who did it. They did the like Ready or Not, and did they do Better Watch Out, that Christmas one with the babysitter? I don't know. I know they did Ready or Not, and that was a fun movie. So we haven't looked at that on the podcast yet, but one day. But anyway, Scream from 2022. I'm going to ruin everything about it. So if you've never seen it, you've been warned. The movie opens up how all Scream movies opens up, with a phone call. It's a phone call to it's a house phone, which is kind of rare these days. I still have one, but I was surprised they were still rocking house phones. I know a lot of people just have cell phones. Um, but the lady answers or looks at the phone, and it says unknown caller. So she doesn't pick it up, which is like, thank you. Like, you're not picking up this phone. So she doesn't answer it. She's texting uh, her friend Amber, and she's talking about her boyfriend. She's like, "Oh, it's Wes bothering me again." I don't know if they were boyfriends, but I think he was trying to like go out with her or something. Um, and yeah, he's named Wes, which I'm sure is a nod to Wes Craven. But she's texting her friend, and she's like, "Oh, Wes is calling." Um, and then he eventually calls back, and I think she answers thinking it's Wes, and so she's finally gonna talk to him. And she answers it, but it's a dude saying his name is like Charlie, and he's like, "Oh, I'm a friend of your mom." Um, and he's like, "Oh yeah, your mom told me a lot about you. She told me that you and her both watch scary movies all the time, and all this shit." Um, and it was so weird because it's Ghostface, which I believe the guy's name is Robert Jackson, is the voice of Ghostface, which I haven't mentioned it, even though I've known it up to this point, that he was also the voice of Mojo Jojo on Powerpuff Girls. So that's pretty sweet. And if you go back to the OG The Walking Dead Telltale game, he was that weird homeless character in like chapter 4, that when they you go underground to try to get to like the hotel that Clementine is with her. Is it her dad that took her? Who took her? Oh no, it was the guy who, like, you come across that car randomly and you take the supplies, and then this guy's like, "That was for my family," and they froze to death or whatever. And so he took Clementine, but he was the voice of the homeless guy in that chapter. If anyone remembers that game, shout out. So anyway, but what I was saying is it's weird hearing him talk normal. You know, he's not doing like the menacing ghost face voice. It was really weird. So anyway, they're talking about horror movies, and he's like, "What's your favorite scary movie?" And she answers The Babadook. And if you've watched our Babadook episode, you will know that I am not a fan of that movie. Tyler and Maverick both were, but and she's like, I like elevated horror, and I hate that fucking term. Elevated horror, I hate it. It's like the people who, if you listen to a song and you don't like it, they're like, well, you just don't understand it. I hate the term elevated horror. Um, so anyway, the dude's like, that sounds boring. He's like, have you ever seen Stab? And the lady's like, oh, I saw the original, you know, a long time ago or whatever. Uh, and so the dude tells her that the movie, he tells her about how the movie starts with the, you know, Drew Barrymore answering the phone. Obviously, it wasn't Drew Barrymore in the Stab movies. But yeah, and playing the game and getting stabbed and all that stuff. And then he goes into asking her if he's like, you want to play a game? And now he's on full Ghostface voice. So she gets nervous. She hangs up. She arms the alarm, like the lock on her door, with her phone. Uh, she then the person calls her back. She doesn't answer. So then her friend Amber texts her and is like, "You should answer it." And she's like, "Why are you saying this?" And then the phone's like, "This isn't Amber, you know." And so I think she goes to like call the cops, but then she gets another text that's like it says, "Answer the phone, bitch, or Amber dies," you know. So she answers the phone, and we go into classic Ghostface stuff where he's making her do the stab trivia. He's gonna ask her 3 questions, and if you know she gets one wrong, she dies and stuff. This whole movie, they mention it in the movie as well about the requel, and they mentioned Halloween 2018 a lot. But this movie, like, I guess it kind of works as a requel, but the story's been the same throughout. That's what's cool about these Scream movies is they've never done a retcon, like got rid of a movie. Like every movie happened, you know. But anyway, he's doing stab trivia. The first question is like, who wrote the book that the stab movies were based on? And she says Gail Weathers and gets that right. Then the question was, who played the dumb bitch who got killed at the beginning of the first stab or whatever? Um, and she doesn't know the answer to that. So he's like counting down, and then she Googles on her phone the IMDb cast and finds the lady. And I thought that was a nice little touch. So she gets that right. So now she's on to the last question. And this is where I got excited, folks. Because the question was, who was the killer in Stab 1? And she yells. She's like, it was Billy Loomis. I got you. It was Billy Loomis, you know? And then the Ghostface goes, oh, I'm sorry. That's just not right. It was Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. And the way he mentioned it, and they mentioned Stu way more in this whole movie than they have in any of the sequels. And the finale, or the climax of the movie, takes place in Stu's house, where the first one took place. And I had talked about in the other episodes how the rumor was that, you know, they were going to bring Matthew Lillard back as Stu. And so I got so excited every time they mention him. I was like, is it going to happen? Is he going to be the killer? Spoiler, he's not the killer. So they really got my hopes up for Matthew Lillard, but he was not the killer, and I was kind of disappointed. But anyway, so she gets the question wrong. So she immediately hangs up again, locks the door, and this was in all the trailers of her arming the lock, and then it's like systems unarmed, and it would, you know, open up again, and then she'll hit the button, and then it'll unarm again, and it's a good scene. So she's freaking out. She gets a phone call again and answers it, which once again at this point I'm like, why do you keep answering this phone? She answers it, and Ghostface says, last or bonus question. Do you think I made it into the house before you armed the lock again? And she doesn't even have time to answer before Ghostface jumps out behind her and attacks her. He like slashes her and she falls down and starts to crawl, and this is when we get our first taste of like super mean Ghostface in this movie. Is he just stomps on her ankle and it's like makes a mean crunch, and he breaks her ankle. He stabs her in the hand because she goes to block the knife stab, you know. Um, and then as she's crawling, he stabs her like in the back, but the police are pulling up, and so the opening ends with the shot of Ghostface as like the sirens are flashing in his mask or whatever. And then we cut to the title card, the classic Scream like slash title card. Um, we cut over to the new girl of the movie who will end up being the star. Sam is her name, which I've seen this complaint, not complaint, but a nitpick, and I kind of agree with it. Sam is kind of a boring character, and maybe that's just because like we're used to Sydney and that's who we're coming to see, you know. And Scream 4, even though it was once again like a reboot type thing, Sydney was very much still the main character in the movie, but Sydney is not. It's clearly Sam is the main character and her sister are the main characters. Um, and yeah, Sam is kind of and we've already Scream 6 already got greenlit, so there's going to be one of those. And like honestly, I could do without having the original cast in Scream 6. Like if we're going to go all in on making Sam the star, I'd rather it just be her in Scream 6 and we go from there, you know? Um because if Sydney isn't going to be the star, then I don't even want her in the movie. Does that make sense? Like, she's the one I want to focus on. But if I can't, and I'm supposed to focus on someone else, then I don't even want her around. So anyway, she's sitting outside. She's like popping pills. And, God, I forgot his name. Jack something, I think. But he's Huey from The Boys. In my notes, I have him written down as Huey. And throughout this podcast, I will probably refer to him as Huey. But he comes over and walks down, or sits down next to her. And I think they work at like a bowling alley. That's what it looked like. And he sits down next to her. And they like do some small talk where she's like, "Oh, I'm popping boner pills or something," and she's like, "You want some?" And he's like, "You are my boner pills," you know. Uh, so they like, I think they go to make out, but then she gets a text from, uh, from Wes, the boyfriend that the girl earlier was talking about. Turns out the woman who got attacked in the opening was her sister. Her sister was like a senior in high school, I think. Like, I think she was still in high school. And it was her sister who got attacked. Apparently she lived, which I was surprised. I think that's the first time they've had someone live in the opening. It's always just straight death. But she lived, and Wes is like, you should really come back to visit, you know? So she and Huey are like, all right, let's go visit my sister in Woodsboro. Um, they head back. As they head back, we cut over to the group of friends in this movie, and the Amber chick, who was the friend that the girl was texting in the beginning, is played by, if anyone has seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, she was the Manson family member who like just got all fucked up and bitten by the dog, and then she falls in the pool and Leo sprays her down with the flamethrower, and I was very excited to see her in this movie. Wes, the boyfriend, is there, and it's his second time on the podcast. He was in Don't Breathe. He was the one who was going to stay in Detroit while the other two were going to, you know, leave. There's Chad and Mindy, who we'll learn later are Randy's nephew and niece. They're his sister's kids, which it was nice to see because there was no connection to Randy at all in the fourth one that I can recall. So it was nice to have a little bit of Randy back. Uh, but anyway, and then Chad's girlfriend is like this random girl that has like red streaks in her hair, and she's kind of nothing. She's just here to be a suspicious character, you know. So Wes also, we learn in the scene, is the son of the blonde deputy girl from the fourth one, who was like real weird for no reason, and then she ended up being good. So he's her son. It was nice to see her back in the movie, that they made that connection a fourth. Um, I believe also, I don't know if I talked about in the fourth one, that Kirby, who got stabbed at the end, Wes Craven had said that she was supposed to be alive, I think, but it was never like confirmed. I think I saw a thing that said, or that had her, like, it was an interview with her in this movie. So I think maybe she's alive. It's confirmed in this movie, but don't quote me on that. So anyway, Chad has bruises on his arm, and they're like, didn't they say that, that Tara fought back? That's the name of the sister who got attacked. And he's like, this was just, I don't remember how he said he got the bruises. But anyway, they're all like, hey, let's go visit Tara in the hospital. So they all get up, but Chad's girlfriend is like, I can't go with you right now. And so she stays behind. And so immediately you're like, oh, like, what's the deal with that? So we cut back over to Sam and Huey, who are in their car heading home. Huey explains, or Sam explains to Huey about the Stab movies, because Huey's never seen them apparently, and they know that the attacker was wearing a Ghostface mask, so she's telling them about the movies. And once again, she makes sure to say Billy Loomis and Stu Macher. Once again, every movie, I swear to God, they just say Billy Loomis. So once again, Stu, Chad and Mindy, and all the friends from earlier, are at the hospital with the little sister when the big sister gets there. She walks in, and immediately you can tell there's some weird vibes going on between her and Amber specifically, but also everyone else is kind of like, there's a line in here about Amber trying to protect Tara from Sam because she was a troublemaker back in the day, and she was nothing but trouble basically. And this is when Mindy, Randy's niece, once again says, "Well, we're all suspects." And I was like, the girl so the friends leave, they go to like a bar. The girl with the red streaks in her hair who's dating Chad is there, and apparently her ex-boyfriend shows up. Or not ex, but they had like a fling or something. Which is crazy, because dude looks like he's like 33 or something, right? He shows up, causes a big scene, and Chad is eventually like, hey, get the fuck out of here, And then the guy pulls out a knife on him, and the dude, they're like, come on, man, just leave. And so finally the dude's like, fuck this, and he just puts the knife back in his pocket and leaves. He goes outside and starts pissing on the side of the building, and when he does, his car turns on behind him. And he's like, hey, what are you do? Get out of my car or whatever. He goes walking over. You can't see into the driver's seat because the brights are on. But eventually when he gets up there, no one's in the driver's seat. So he's like, So he reaches in through the window, turns off the car, and then the second he like stands back up, Ghostface is standing behind him. And I love this he just gives him a little poke to the side of the neck. And that's all it takes. And he just like stands there and watches the guy like bleed out or whatever. And so I really like that. Sam, then we go over to a scene once again with Sam, and she's in the hospital. and she's popping some more of these pills that we don't know what it is. And then she looks up into the mirror at this bathroom that she's in, and Billy Loomis is just standing there looking at her with the blood marks on his shirt and everything still. And I looked at, and it is played by the original dude. But it was weird because I think they were trying to still make him look like young, like he was back then. But clearly, like his face looked weird to me. But it was Billy, and he's like, "Oh, how's it going now? These antipsychotics aren't working so well anymore and shit." And he's like, "You know why this is happening? You know what you need to do and stuff, right?" And I was like, "What's going on here?" You know. As she's walking back to the hospital room, she gets a call, and of course, it's from Ghostface. And Ghostface is like, "I know your secret, you know." And then she says, "Come and get me." And Ghostface goes, "With pleasure." And then he's there. This is always what I love the most about these Scream movies. Is like, they'll just call him out, and then Ghostface will be like, "Bet, bitch." And then he'll just be behind them, ready to go. And I love it. He attacks her. Classic thing where she just like hits him with a frying pan, not a frying pan, like a bedpan or something, and manages to get away. And she runs down the hall and gets to a cop, and she's like, "There's a guy down there, he tried to kill me, you know." But of course, when they go back down there, Ghostface is gone. Luckily, there is still like some chairs and stuff overturned, so there's a scene, or there's a telltale sign of like a struggle, you know. They look, and the phone call came from Amber's phone. Uh, and she, they're like, "That's awful weird, you know." And Amber's like, "Well, the last time that he attacked it, he like hacked into my phone and used it or whatever to text Tara, you know." But Huey like calls her out. He is like, "Oh yeah, that's very convenient." And then she was like, "Well, where were you then?" And he was like, "I was in here watching Netflix." Huey starts watching all these stab movies to learn about what he's up against in these wild Ghostface is around. So anyway, the sheriff, the blonde, she's the sheriff now. We learn the blonde deputy from the last one. She makes Huey and Amber get out of the room so she can talk to Sam alone. And basically, she tells Sam, she's like, "Why don't you get out of here?" She's like, "No one wants you here. You're just causing a mess. You were causing a mess when you were here, you know, a couple years ago." She's like, "Why don't you just leave?" And the Sam is like, "Fuck you," you know. Um, so the deputy or the sheriff leaves. Sam stays with her sister. And immediately she starts telling her the secret that Ghostface had alluded to. Like, she doesn't waste any time, which I was kind of, you know, I appreciated. She tells her that their mom cheated on their dad when they were in high school. And she got knocked up by a different dude. Uh, she found this out because she found, like, old diaries that her mom had written in the attic. So she goes and confronts her mom about you know, the her cheating on dad, and you know all this stuff. Meanwhile, her dad is standing behind her. Her dad did not know that she was not his daughter, and that day or that night is when he left. So she's like, "It was my fault that he left." The mom never forgave her and all this stuff. And of course, we find out that her dad, who knocked up her mom, was Billy Loomis. Uh, this is when I started wondering who the mom was. I was like, well, who was he, you know, because this was around the time with Sydney. So I was like, who was the mom? I thought maybe it was that cheerleader lady in the bathroom in the first one who was like, if you ask me, she's just crazy or whatever, you know? Um, so she says, yeah, Billy Loomis is her dad, and she goes, and someone knows. And once again, I was like, well, Stu would know. They were the bestest of friends, you know. Uh, the little sister's upset. She's like, "Why are you springing on me on this now?" She makes her leave. Huey was standing at the door listening, obviously. And she's like, "Aren't you scared?" And he's like, a little bit, you know? And she's like, this is the part in horror movies where you scream at people to leave and get out of the situation. So she's like, I'm telling you now, leave. And he's like, nah, I'm going to stick around, you know? Uh, so she's like, okay. And she says, well, we need an expert. And then it cuts to old man Dewey now, who's living in a trailer. We see he has an urn of Tatum's ashes on there, which was a nice touch. Obviously, his little sister who got killed in the attic door with the doggy door and shit. He makes some coffee, turns on the news, and we see Gail on the news hosting like the Today Show or the Morning Show or something. And Dewey's like all smiling, you know. As he's sitting there, he gets a knock on the door, and he's like, "Go away! I don't do interviews, you know." And they're like, "Please, we just want to talk to you." And he goes, "Name me one reason why I should talk to you." And the lady goes, "I'm Billy Loomis's daughter." And he goes, "That's a terrible reason for me to talk to you." You know? Um, but eventually he's, you know, they're like, "My sister was attacked. I was attacked. We need your help," you know? So he lets them in. We find out, you know, that Gail and Dew aren't married anymore. Um, fucking Dewey immediately, as they're sitting on the couch, is like, okay, how long have you known this guy? Pointing to Huey. And she's like, oh, a while. And he goes, are you sure? It's always the love interest. It's all he has been. I've been through this all the time. It's going to be him. And he was like, and Huey was like, what the fuck? He was like, fuck you, dude, you know? And Dewey's like, I'm just telling you that that's how it goes. So then he goes, well, if it's not him, it's going to be someone in your sister's group of friends who somehow has figured out your secret. And that's the, you know, person to deal with. And so Sam is like, okay, well, can you come and help us, you know? And Dewey's like, I've been stabbed 9 times, I have permanent nerve damage, and a permanent limp. He's like, why would I want to do this again, you know? And they're like, they give him like, you know, one of these pep speeches, and they're like, come on, we can solve this, you can do it, you know? And he's like, get the fuck out of here, and he kicks them out. Uh, as they leave, Dewey calls Sydney. She's out on a run, and she has a stroller. Apparently, she has multiple kids because she mentions kids plural. She's like, I gotta get the kids ready for school or whatever. We also find out that she's married to Mark. I don't remember his last name, but it was the FBI dude who she was kind of hitting it off with in the third one, which I thought was weird. I forgot to mention in the fourth one, but he's nowhere to be seen in the fourth one. They don't even mention him. And he's not in this movie either, but it was nice to hear that like that turned out good, you know? So anyway, we also get a little thing in here where Dew mentions that he and Gail haven't talked in years because it didn't end good, you know? So it's been a couple years since they split up. He goes, hey, it's happening again. He goes, do you have a gun? And then she goes, I'm Sidney fucking Prescott. Of course I have a gun, which I like that line. Dewey says, whatever you hear, whatever you see, don't come here. And she's like, all due respect, I had no intentions of coming here. And he's like, well, good, you know? So then he has to tell Gail, and he like is having to hype himself up to call her, but he doesn't manage to work up enough nerve to call her, so he just texts her. He says that it's happening again, don't come back. And then he sends like, hope you're doing well, smiley face, you know? And he's like, why did I send that? Dewey in this movie, this is probably the best version of Dewey, in my opinion. He was like just comical enough, but just like he was serious enough at the same time. And he was like this grizzled version of Dewey. I really like David Arquette in this movie. It was absolutely probably his best performance since the first one. Because the second one, he's kind of like he's even more goofy than he was in the first one. And then the third one, he's like trying to be like the Hollywood guy or whatever. So I really like, and then the fourth one, what did he do in the fourth one? He was just a sheriff, but he was kind of boring in that movie. But I really like Dewey in this movie. I thought David Arquette did a great job. Dewey, of course, decides to help them because he just can't help himself. It's in his nature. So he gears up with his old cop gun and his badge and everything. He pulls up uh, to the house that the girls or the Huey and them went to. Don't ask me how he found out where they were, unless he like followed them. Um, this is when we find out because all the friends are there, and this is when we find out that Chad and Mindy are Randy's sister's kids. Uh, Immediately, fucking Sam tells them the secret that she's Billy Loomis's kid and stuff. Uh, and she goes, and one of you is the killer. And they're like, what? And she's like, yeah, one of you is going to be the killer. And Dewey's sitting there like, yeah, it's going to be one of you. And so he looks at the first guy they call out is Wes because of the relationship he had with Tara. And Wes is like, well, maybe it's you, Dewey. And he's like, why would I want to do this? And he's like, I don't know, maybe because you got dumped and you're a loser and you're drunk or whatever. And Dewey's like, well, maybe you are the killer. Because that cut deep. And I was like, oh, shit. Um, this is also when we find out, apparently the weird dude who got fucking killed or whatever in the parking lot uh, with the little poke in the neck was Stu's like cousin, I believe. Um, and somehow they get to the thing that whoever is doing this is going after people related to the people in the OG movie. Um, and this is when Mindy stands up and starts talking about it's a requel, it has to have a continuing story, but brand new characters. But you have to have the legacy characters involved too and stuff. Uh, and she's, yeah, explains all this shit about requels and mentions Halloween 2018 a lot. Sam is like, so you're telling me I'm stuck in the middle of a fan fiction? And, and Mindy is like, you're not stuck in the middle. You're the star or whatever. And then Mindy says, she goes, well, I already know who the killer is. It makes perfect sense. And they're like, well, who? And she goes, Sam. And she like lists all the because she's Billy Loomis's kid, and she lists all the reasons. And everyone's like, And then Sam looks over to Dewey, and Dewey's like, oh yeah, this sounds pretty solid. So she's like, fuck you guys. And so she leaves. She gets in her car and takes off. Billy's in her back seat again, and she sees him up in the rearview mirror. And he starts like talking shit to her again. And he's like, start killing people. After this, we go over to the blonde deputy, now the sheriff, to her house. She's getting food ready or she's just like cleaning up around the house, and she hears her door creep open. And so she calls out to Wes, her son, but he doesn't answer. So she's like, So she grabs a knife out of the knife rack, I guess, and goes walking over to the door and sees the door creaked open. And so she's getting closer and closer, and then out of the side door, Wes comes walking out, and he's got earbuds in, so that's why he didn't hear her. So she's like, hey, I'm gonna go get Chinese food. Can you get the table ready or whatever? And he's like, yeah. So she leaves. Dude gets the table ready, but then immediately goes to take a shower. As the blonde sheriff is driving to the Chinese restaurant, she gets a phone call. Of course, it's from Ghostface. He's like, I'm going to kill your son, She busts a U-turn, puts on the lights. She's flooring it. She tries to call her son, but he's in the shower, so he can't hear her, Ghostface then calls her back, and she answers, and he's like, have you ever seen Psycho? And I popped for that because, I think I've mentioned Psycho almost every episode. Like, these movies really remind me of, like, the Psycho. So I was expecting, like, we were going to get, like, the straight-up Psycho knife scene, Ghostface is taunting her. He's like, you're not going to make it, She eventually pulls up in front of the house, jumps out, goes running, gets to the front door that's open, but Ghostface pops out from the side and stabs her in the gut. And then as she falls, Ghostface gets on top of her and just stabs her a lot. Like, he makes sure that she is dead. These are angry stabs, dude. These are like Michael Myers, Rob Zombie Halloween stabs. We're just like, you know, you know. The kid gets out of the shower. He's walking around. You get two different scenes of him like opening the door, and you can't see behind the door, and then he closes it, and no one's there. You know, so it does two of those fake out killer gags. He hears the front door creak open again. He goes to it and sees it's open, but he doesn't like open it. He just like and closes it. But then he turns around, and Ghostface is there, and Ghostface just stabs him in the neck, like straight through, and you see it slide out, and Ghostface just stares at him as he falls down and dies. Sam shows up to the crime scene, sees everyone dead. As she's there, Gail pulls up. Gail's back in the movie, and she introduces herself to Gail. And she goes, "Yeah, I was attacked, you know." And Gail's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And then Gail, as she goes to introduce herself, she goes, "I'm Gail." And she looks over, and Dewey is getting to the crime scene. And so she goes, "Riley, Weathers," you know. So that was a nice little touch that she, you know, still thinks of herself as Dewey's wife. She runs over to Dewey and starts hitting him on the shoulder. And she's like, "You send me a fucking text?" She's like, "You can't even call me." We get this whole scene where we kind of learn more of their thing. Dewey basically broke it off. They moved to New York for her new job, but Dewey just couldn't make it. So, like, I think he was there a couple years maybe, and then he just left in the middle of the night. And they have a moment where they're like, you know, "I was meant to do what I'm doing, and you were always meant to be in Woodsboro. It's just what, you know, we're too far apart, you know." Also, we learned that Dewey was forced to retire from the police force, you know, after all this shit that was going on. But anyway, they have this nice little reunion type scene, and basically they're like, "All right, well, let's try to find the killer," you know. After that, we get a cameo from Dead Meat. Shout out to Dead Meat, James and Chelsea. Huey is on YouTube now. He's gone through all the stab movies, and he's watching Dead Meat podcast, but it's not called that. I think it's called like Film Fails or whatever. And they're talking about Stab 8, and they're like, "What a piece of shit fucking movie. Like, ruining our childhood. We deserve a real Stab movie," or whatever. Also, as they're doing this, there's a clip of Stab 8, and it's like a chrome-looking Ghostface chasing people around. Apparently, that was Matthew Lillard doing that scene. So, shout out to Matthew Lillard. He technically was in this movie. But anyway, shout out Dead Meat. Cool to see them in the movie. Sam sees, as they're at the crime scene, Sam sees the cop from the hospital that she ran down to in the earlier scene. That cop is supposed to be watching her sister. So she's like, "Well, if you're here, who's watching my sister, you know?" And the guy's like, And so Dewey and her like, "Fuck." And so Dewey's like, "Come on, let's go." And so they load into her car, and they start driving towards the hospital. We cut over to the sister who's in the hospital. She hears a door close out in the hallway somewhere, and the sister's like, "Hello?" And no one answers, and you can hear the heart rate machine that she's plugged up to start to like beep faster and faster. And so she's like, "Fuck this," you know? So she gets herself into a wheelchair, and she's just like in tons of pain trying to move around in this wheelchair. As she gets in the wheelchair, the lights go out, and she's like, "Jesus Christ." She opens up the door. She goes wheeling down the hall, and then as she turns a corner, she finds a cop there dead with his throat cut. She does though, smart girl. She does go and try to get his gun, but the gun is gone from the holster. So I like that little touch, you know. Um, she hears like another door close, I believe. So she goes into a room and closes the door, and sits there with. I don't remember what she picked up, but she sits there and waits. And then as the door opens up and someone walks in, she hits them. But it turns out to be Dewey, or not Dewey, Huey. And Huey's like, "Oh, Sam called, said that you were here." But as he's talking, Ghostface jumps in and attacks him. But here's my problem: is Ghostface attacks him and just throws him to the ground, and then immediately leaves him. And as soon as that happened, I went, "Welp, Huey is Ghostface." I was like, if Ghostface ever attacks you and he just leaves you, you know that guy is Ghostface. Um, that was another one. Is it's kind of very easy in this movie to figure out who Ghostface was. I don't think after a while realizing that it wasn't going to be Stu, it was pretty easy for me to go, "Oh, it's probably these two." And then at the end, I was like, "Yeah, you know." um, Sam or the little sister tries wheeling out, but she gets knocked out of the wheelchair, so now she's just crawling. Ghostface is walking behind her when the phone rings, Huey's phone rings, and he picks it up, and we see him turn on the little voice thing or whatever, and it charges up like, "She," you know? Uh, and Ghostface tells her that she can pick who will die. It could be Huey or the sister, you know? He's like, "Come on, you can't make a fucking decision." And she's just like, I can't, you know? And he's like, "Jesus, you're pathetic." And then Sam goes, "Or maybe I'm just buying time, fuckhead." And then the elevator door opens up and Dewey's there. And he fires off some shots, but it's Dewey. So, of course, they're terrible. And he misses. And Ghostface just, like, jumps out of the way. Dewey goes over and helps Huey up. But as he's walking with Huey, he gets attacked by Ghostface. But he manages to get him off. And then he shoots Ghostface, like, a bunch of times in the chest. But, of course, then they all go run into the elevator. And I was like, "You fucking idiots. You have him right there, you know?" And then Dewey's like, "Hold on. You always got to shoot him in the head, you know?" And Sam's like, "Who cares? We can get out of here." And Dewey's like, "I care." And so he closes the elevator. And as soon as that happened, I was like, "Oh, no." I made the prediction in Scream 4. But he goes over to Ghostface, who's still laying there. He points the gun. He's about to shoot. But then his phone rings. And that causes just a split-second distraction for Ghostface to pop up and stab Dewey in the gut, and then he stabs him in the back, and then he pulls up with both of the knives and guts Dewey basically. And as Dewey is falling, Ghostface goes, "It's an honor," you know. And Dewey falls over, and Dewey is dead. I was still, because they've done it twice, I was still like, he might come back, you know. But Dewey dies. We see the person calling him was Gale. And so Gale was trying to call him. Yeah. Also, when we learn who this is that just killed him, I kind of think it's a little weird that person was able to manhandle him like this. But, you know, whatever. So Dewey's finally dead. Gale shows up to the crime scene and she sees as they're wheeling out his body. It's playing this sad music. She's crying and shit. It was sad as fuck because we've gone through, like, I mean, we've seen the whole, like, story between Gale and Dewey get to this point, and now Dewey's finally dead, you know? After this, we get a little scene of Sam, or everyone go at the hospital again. Sam is saying sorry to Gale, you know, about Dewey or whatever. And and she's like, "I should have stopped him," you know? And Sam goes, "If you stopped him, my sister would be dead." And Gale's just like, But in my mind, I was like, Gale's like, "I don't give a fuck about your sister," you know? Sam starts to walk away. As she does, Gale is sitting there, and she looks up, and of course, Sydney is here. And Sydney is like, "I just heard," you know? And she goes over and gives Gale a hug. Yeah, so Sydney's finally showed up. Sam goes to her sister and tells her, she's never gonna leave again and shit. Says she was scared she would wind up like Billy, and be a psycho and everything. Um, and so the sister's like, all right, what do we do now? And Sam is like, we get the fuck out of Woodsboro. And I was like, oh, cool, that's a nice, she's finally like, let's get out of here. So she loads her up in a wheelchair. They're leaving. Um, Sydney comes up to Sam and talks to her, and she's like, "Oh, you're Billy's daughter, right?" And she's like, "Yeah, Um, and Sydney tries to say, we can help you find whoever is doing this, but Sam is like, "I'm just getting out of here," and Sydney's like, "It never works to run. Like it just doesn't work." And the girl's like, "Whatever, I'm leaving." And Sydney's like, basically like, "I want you to help me and Gail find Ghostface so we can kill him." And she's like, no. And so she leaves. And so Sydney's like, all right, well, good luck. She leaves. But of course, Sydney pulled a Gale move and she put a tracker on the car. So they're able to follow the car wherever they go. Huey is driving, but then the sister looks and she doesn't have her inhaler. I forgot to mention it, but they show it like a couple times how she has asthma or whatever. So Huey doesn't want to go back to the hospital. So she goes, well, I have one at Amber's house. We could stop there. So Huey doesn't want to stop, but they're like, come on, just stop. And so he's like, all right, fine. So they stop at Amber's house. There's a party going on, and I was like, that never ends up good. Amber is like, I need some beer. It's in the basement. And so she goes in the basement and it does another, like, she opens up the fridge and you can't see. When she closes it, Mindy is standing there. And Mindy is like, you're a fucking idiot. You never go alone into this, the basement or whatever. And all this shit. And Mindy is like, well, what if I'm the killer? Or not, Amber is like, well, what if I'm the killer? And Mindy's like, you're not. Because I am. And Amber's like, what? And then she's like, I'm not though, but I could be. Um, so anyway, I thought they were gonna fuck when they were down there, and we learned later like Mindy's into chicks, but they were like giving off that vibe. I was like, oh, is this where this is going? Chad is upstairs. He's making out with his girlfriend who's back in the movie after not being seen for the last like hour. And she's like, why don't we go upstairs? And he's like, that sounds great, but I'm not 100% sure that you're not the killer. She doesn't take that good. And so she like walks off and leaves. Chad keeps trying to text her, but she won't answer. So finally, Chad's like, fuck, I gotta go look for her. So he tells his sister that he's gonna go look for his girl outside. He leaves. As he goes outside, he gets a text message from his girl that has this like tracking app where you can track each other's phones and see where you are. He mentioned this earlier to her and said it was for like a safety thing, and now that these killing things were going on, he was like, it'd probably be good if me and you had these so we could see where each other were. But she was like, no, you're just trying to, keep tabs on me or whatever. So he accepts. He sees where she is. He starts walking towards her. The beep gets faster the closer you get to people, He gets to where he's like right next to her and she's in like this cornfield or something and he can't see her. And he goes, nah, fuck that, So he turns to leave, but he gets stabbed in the leg by Ghostface. He runs away and he's like limping and shit. He hides behind a shed and he can hear the beeping getting faster. So he throws the tracker into the woods so it's no longer on him, or his phone basically. He hides there for a while. He doesn't hear anything. So eventually he's like, all right. He turns, starts shambling away, and then this was in the trailers too, but out of the shed, the doors bust open, Ghostface comes running behind him. The dude's like, wait, but Ghostface jumps on him and stabs him, and he gives him like 3 good shots in the side, but then Amber's car pulls up and Ghostface sees it, and so he leaves. Spoiler, this guy apparently lived. He was in the ambulance at the end of the movie, and I was like, that guy is alive, So shout out to Chad. He's still alive. Sam and them get to the party. They tell her that, they need an inhaler. Amber's like, okay. She goes, party's over, you know? And then Dewey, like, um, turns on the light and he, like, gets everyone to leave. Um, Mindy, uh, then, because Huey's like, hey, is there any beer left? And Mindy's like, yeah, there's some in the basement. And Huey's like, all right, you want to come with me, you know? And she's like, no, but it's a good thing you asked. And he's like, okay, I'll be right back. And then they're like, you know? um, he goes down in the basement and she's like, he's dead. Um, then Chad's girl comes back and sits down next to her. And she's like, I can't find Chad anywhere, you know? And Mindy is like, well, he went to look for you outside. And then basically she gets real creepy on Mindy and she's like, you think I'm the killer? You think I'm going to cut you up into pieces, you know? And Mindy's like, well, now I do. And once again, this is all just to be like, ooh, this girl's the killer. Um, so she leaves, uh, or she like walks out of the room. We go over, and I believe Sam gets a phone call from. This is weird because it says unknown caller, and then under that it says maybe Sydney Prescott. I was like, is that a thing? So she answers it, and Sydney and them had seen where they went, and they're like, you need to leave. And she's like, why? And this is when she goes, you're at Stu Macher's house. And it zooms out, and you know, you couldn't tell at first with the lights and the party going on. But as it zooms out, it's like, oh yeah, this is Stu's house, you know? So they're like, someone wanted you to be there. After that, we get a scene where Mindy is watching the scene in Stab where Jamie Kennedy is watching Halloween and is like, turn around, Jamie, you know? But she's going, come on, Jamie, turn around, talking to him, you know? Which is kind of weird thinking about it. Like, that's her uncle, and she's like watching these movies. Obviously, he didn't die in that one, but it was just kind of weird. Um, but as she's doing it, of course, Ghostface is creeping up behind her. It's extra, extra meta. But she manages to turn around and see this in time. So Ghostface attacks her. She breaks a lamp over his head. I thought that she looked all right, but then she like puts her head down, and I was like, oh, is she dead? Sam comes in and finds her and is like, oh my god, and she goes over to her. Tara and Amber come down, and Amber's like, what did you do, you know? And then Chad's girlfriend comes walking in, she's got blood on her hands. She's like, I just found, Chad or whatever, he's dead. Everyone's yelling, and finally, Amber's like, they're all like, oh, you're the killer to Chad's girlfriend. And she's like, I'm telling you, I am not the fucking killer. And then Amber goes, I know. And she pulls out a gun and shoots Mindy or the girlfriend in the head. And she's like, because I am. And Huey's like, what the fuck? And they all go running. Once again, it was kind of pretty easy to figure out Amber was one of the killers in this movie. But anyway, they all run. I don't remember where Tara goes to, but Huey and Sam wind up in the basement together. And he tells her that there's always two killers. And he says that he thinks it's the sister, Tara. Like, because they were on she got her to come back. They have this rocky history, you know. But she's like, well, I know her a lot better than I know you. So she leaves Huey. Sydney and them show up and they get strapped. Amber comes walking out and she's like, you gotta help me. He attacked me or whatever. And then Sydney's like, what do you think? And Gail's like, it's a trap. And so Amber's like, fuck this. And so she pulls out a strap. She shoots. She ends up hitting Gail in the stomach immediately. Sydney misses all her shots. Sydney's like, we need to go to the hospital. But Gail's like, no, you need to finish this, you know? So Gail stays outside. Sydney goes inside. Upstairs, Sam finds her sister tied up in the closet. And she starts to untie her. But then she can't, she has that moment of doubt where, this might be the killer. So she's like, and then it cuts away. to Sydney, who gets a phone call from Sydney, and we finally get the hello, Sydney, Um, he's talking to her a lot, and then she's like, I'm bored. And Ghostface's like, wait! And she hangs up and she shoots through a door and kicks it open, and Huey's there with a cell phone, and he like got hit in the shoulder or something, I believe. And he's like, I'm hiding for Ghostface or whatever, and you fucking, shot me. Out of nowhere, Ghostface pops out, attacks Sydney. Her and Sydney fight. They go falling down the stairs. Um, and then they fall down the stairs. Ghostface's mess up. Sam comes and manages to get the gun that Sydney had, and she gets off the ground. And then Huey comes walking down, and he's like, okay, okay, and he goes over to her, and then of course he takes the gun and he stabs her in the stomach, and he's like, yeah, it was me. Uh, he's like, man, you really should have listened to Dewey. He nailed it from the start. So apparently the big thing in this movie is Huey and Amber are super fans of Stab. And they say that it's time someone finally made another great Stab movie, and they needed to give them real life inspiration for a new Stab. So they're going to set up this whole story. Um, they're doing a classic frame job on Sam, because she was Billy's daughter and she came back for revenge and all this stuff. Hugh and Amber apparently met on a Reddit thread, made this plot. I think they're together, like they're in a relationship. Um, uh, and yeah, they're like, this is all part of the plan or whatever. Sydney lunges for a knife that's on the countertop, but she gets stabbed by Amber. Dewey is like, sorry, but we got to kill you this time too. It's finally the time that Sydney gets killed in the Stab movie. um Amber goes to get the. Also, I think at some point they bring in Gail, who's still all fucked up because she got shot. Amber goes upstairs to get the sister, but as she goes, "Hey, the sister's gone." And Huey's like, "What?" And Sam goes, "Yeah, I untied her, bitch." She's like, "I didn't trust you." Uh, so the phone rings, but before the Amber can even answer it, she like gets attacked by the sister who has a crutch, and she like beats her up. Sam hits Huey and runs away. Sydney and Gail team up on Amber now and break a bottle over her head. She tries talking her way out of it, uh, but then like manages to like hit them in their wounds, in the knife wounds. So she gets the upper hand again. Um, Gail though does manage to kick her off, and in between all this fighting, the stovetop had been turned on. So Gail gets up, gets the gun, shoots Amber a bunch, and Amber falls over onto the oven thing and catches on fire. And I was laughing my ass off in the theater because I was like, "This is just Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again." She just she's on fire again. Um, and so yeah, so she's dead. Upstairs, uh, Sam jumps out of a closet onto Dewey, or not Dewey. I keep saying that it's Huey. They fight. They stumble down the stairs again. As she's crawling, she sees Ghostface's knife like over in the corner. She also sees Billy in a mirror, and he's like, "Yeah," giving her a nod. She goes over, grabs the knife. Huey turns her over and is like, "Sorry, this is what we got to do now." But then she goes and stabs him like through the cheek. And then gets on top of him and just goes to town, just stabbing him, like just going crazy on him. Uh, and then eventually cuts his throat, and Huey is dead. Um, the girls come in, they tell her, careful, they always come back. So Sam takes the gun and just like lights up Huey on the ground, and they're like, huh. But then, of course, behind them, here comes Amber, who's all burned up, and she's charging them. But she gets shot from the side, and it's the sister who is like, I still prefer the Babadook. Um, After this, we see Mindy and Chad ended up living, so shout out to them. I'm sure they'll be in the next one. Gail talks about, she's not going to write about this because she was kind of struggling writing. She goes, I'm not going to write about this, let these fucks die nameless. No one needs to know them. She goes, I'm going to write about Dewey and talk about his life, Sam sees Billy one more time in the door of the police car, and he's like, giving her like a fatherly nod before she goes and gets into an ambulance with her sister. We pan out, and that's the end of Scream. By the way, I'm not sure how I feel about the whole, like, Billy being, like, the proud father. And it's like, this dude was a piece of shit. Am I supposed to, like, I don't know. It just, that kind of seemed weird to me, the whole, whatever. This movie had a budget of $24 million, and as of when I was recording this, it had made $107 million. Let's see, what else we got here? That's it. That's all that's all the information I had on there. Best of, worst of. My best of. My best of will probably be Ghostface killing the blonde sheriff. Because that was the first time he really, like, just goes to town stabbing. I was like, holy shit, And that was really solid. And then, like, the follow-up with the West getting stabbed through the neck. It was just really brutal. It was really good. Worst of... Maybe the whole Billy in the mirror thing. Like, I just didn't like it. I don't know. There was something about it. It just felt off to me. But that's like a small nitpick, But anyway, that's my best of, worst of. And that is the end of Scream. We've gone through all the movies. Whenever the sixth one comes out, I'm sure, I'll talk about that. My official ranking for Scream, the series, starting from worst to best. At number 5, which I think is the worst. And I know this is controversial because this movie, a lot of people seem to like it. But Scream 4, I did not care for it. I didn't like it. So Scream 4 is at the bottom. Just above Scream 4 is Scream 3. It was kind of a mediocre one. I liked it better than I think a lot of people like Scream 3. But it was just kind of in the middle of the road for me. So Scream 3 will be above Scream 4. After that, this is the hard part. Alright, I think I'm going to put Scream 2 at number 3. And then just barely above that, I think. I think the kills are pretty good in Scream 2, too. But killer-wise, even though I love Timothy Olyphant, I do think that this group of killers was probably better. So number 2 will be Scream 2022. And then, of course, number 1 is the OG, It's a Scream, baby! Which is Scream from 96 or 97, whenever it came out. But there you go. There's the official ranking of Scream. Yeah. So thanks for watching. In case you hadn't tell, I'm back on the PC. That's pretty cool. So hopefully it'll stay like this. And yeah, I'll see you Friday for the Chernobyl Diaries. And that will just be me. And the next week, I promise, Maverick will be back. I promise. And I'll probably take a few weeks off of overtimes, and then we'll come back with something else. I don't know what right now. But yeah, also, when this comes out, we got there's a new logo on the channel. I'm not sure how long it'll stay there, but we're going to work with that for a while. There's a new banner if you check out the page. So yeah. So anyway, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. And I'll see you guys Friday. All right.